In 1945, as Allied forces advanced, the world held its breath.
In the summer of 1945, the world witnessed a decision that changed human history forever. Two cities in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, became silent witnesses to unprecedented destruction. The atomic bombs dropped by the United States not only obliterated buildings and infrastructure, but also claimed hundreds of thousands of lives in an instant. Yet behind this devastation lies a profound question that remains fiercely debated to this day. Was dropping the atomic bomb truly necessary? Or was there another way to end the war without causing such immense suffering? In this episode, we will dive deep into the facts, evidence, and arguments surrounding one of the most controversial decisions in modern warfare history. Let's explore together whether this action can be justified militarily, politically, and morally. And most importantly, what lessons can we learn from this tragedy for the future of humanity? 1. Background to World War II and the development of the atomic bomb. By early 1945, World War II had raged for nearly 6 years, engulfing much of the globe in unprecedented conflict. The Allied forces, led by the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, had made significant advances against the Axis powers. In Europe, Nazi Germany was on the brink of collapse, with Allied troops pushing steadily from the west and Soviet forces closing in from the east. However, the war in the Pacific against Japan was far from over. Despite suffering heavy losses and facing a relentless bombing campaign, Japan's military and government remained determined to continue fighting. The Japanese leadership refused to surrender unconditionally, hoping to negotiate terms that would preserve some of their sovereignty. Meanwhile, the United States had been secretly developing a new and devastating weapon under the code name the Manhattan Project. This top-secret program brought together some of the brightest scientific minds to harness the power of nuclear fission. The goal was to create an atomic bomb, a weapon so powerful it could end the war swiftly and decisively. By mid-1945, the project had succeeded in producing 2 types of atomic bombs ready for deployment. The U.S. government faced a critical decision: whether to use this new weapon to force Japan's surrender or continue the costly conventional warfare that was expected to result in even more casualties. Japan's refusal to surrender and the fierce resistance shown in battles such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa had convinced many American military leaders that an invasion of the Japanese mainland would be long and bloody. The atomic bomb was seen by some as a way to avoid that scenario and bring the war to a rapid conclusion. Yet, the decision to use such a destructive weapon carried profound moral and ethical implications that would echo through history. Understanding the context of this moment is essential to grasp why the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki occurred and why they remain subjects of intense debate today. 2. The decision to drop the bomb. As World War II neared its end, the United States faced one of the most difficult decisions in its history. The military and political leadership had to determine how to bring the war with Japan to a swift conclusion. The option to use the newly developed atomic bomb was weighed against other strategies, each with significant consequences. One major alternative was a full-scale invasion of the Japanese mainland, known as Operation Downfall. Military planners estimated that this invasion could result in hundreds of thousands of American casualties and potentially millions of Japanese deaths. The Japanese military was expected to fiercely defend their homeland, making the invasion a brutal and prolonged conflict. Another strategy considered was a naval blockade, combined with continued conventional bombing to starve Japan into surrender. However, this approach risked prolonging the war for months or even years, causing further suffering and destruction. President Harry S. Truman, who had assumed office only months earlier after the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, was faced with this grave decision. Truman was advised by his military commanders and scientific experts who had worked on the Manhattan Project. Many military leaders believed that using the atomic bomb would save lives in the long run by avoiding a costly invasion. At the same time, Truman was aware of the moral weight of deploying such a devastating weapon. He sought to end the war quickly to prevent further loss of American and Allied lives, and to demonstrate American military power, particularly to the Soviet Union. The decision was also influenced by geopolitical considerations, as tensions with the Soviet Union were beginning to rise even before the war ended. On July 25, 1945, Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb against Japan, hoping it would force a swift surrender. The bombs were dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. These actions led to Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15th, effectively ending World War II. Yet the decision remains controversial, with debates about whether the bombings were necessary or justified. Understanding the military, political, and ethical factors behind Truman's choice is key to grasping the complexity of this historic moment. 3. Immediate and long-term impacts. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki caused unprecedented physical destruction. In Hiroshima, the bomb exploded approximately 600 meters above the city center, unleashing a blast equivalent to about 15 kilotons of TNT. Nearly everything within a radius of 1 mile was completely destroyed. Buildings were flattened, trees were incinerated, and fires raged uncontrollably across the city. An estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people died instantly in Hiroshima, with many more succumbing to injuries and radiation sickness in the following weeks and months. 3 days later, Nagasaki faced a similar fate when the second bomb was dropped, with a blast yield of about 21 kilotons. The terrain of Nagasaki, surrounded by hills, limited the bomb's destructive radius somewhat. But still, an estimated 40,000 people died immediately. The total death toll from both bombings, including those who died later from radiation effects, is estimated to be between 129,000 and 226,000 people. The physical devastation was matched by profound psychological trauma among survivors, known as hibakusha. International reaction to the bombings was mixed. Some saw it as a necessary step to end the war and save lives, while others condemned it as an inhumane act of mass destruction. Japan's government was initially shocked and devastated, but the bombings ultimately forced their surrender. The long-term health effects of radiation exposure became apparent in the years following the bombings. Survivors suffered from increased rates of cancer, chronic illnesses, and genetic damage. Children born to survivors sometimes faced birth defects and other health problems. Medical studies and research on hibakusha have provided critical insights into the effects of nuclear radiation on human health. The bombings also sparked a global debate on nuclear weapons, leading to efforts to control and eventually reduce nuclear arsenals. Despite the passage of decades, the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remains a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. 4. Ethical controversy and debate. The decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki remains one of the most controversial actions in modern history. Supporters argue that the bombings were necessary to end World War II quickly and save countless lives. From a military perspective, the bombings forced Japan's unconditional surrender, avoiding a potentially prolonged and bloody invasion of the Japanese mainland. Many believe that the alternative, Operation Downfall, would have resulted in far greater casualties on both sides. Politically, the bombings demonstrated American military power, sending a clear message to the Soviet Union as tensions between the two superpowers began to rise. On the other hand, critics condemned the bombings as an inhumane act that targeted civilians indiscriminately. They argue that Japan was already on the brink of surrender and that diplomatic alternatives had not been fully explored. The immense loss of civilian life and the long-term suffering caused by radiation raise profound ethical questions. Humanitarian perspectives emphasize the moral cost of using nuclear weapons and the precedent it set for future conflicts. The bombings also sparked debates about the legality and morality of targeting civilian populations in war. Historians continue to examine newly declassified documents and testimonies to better understand the decision-making process. Some suggest that political motives, including the desire to intimidate the Soviet Union, played a larger role than previously acknowledged. Others highlight the genuine fear among American leaders of a costly invasion and the desire to end the war swiftly. Reflecting on this history, many lessons emerge about the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki serve as a stark reminder of the need for international cooperation to prevent the use of such weapons again. They also challenge us to consider the balance between military necessity and humanitarian values in times of war. Ultimately, the debate over the bombings is not just about history, but about how humanity chooses to confront the horrors of conflict. 5. Conclusion. The decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a turning point in world history. It brought a swift end to World War II, but at an enormous human cost. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost instantly, with many more suffering long-term effects from radiation exposure. The bombings reshaped global politics, ushering in the nuclear age and a new era of military strategy and international relations. They also sparked ongoing debates about morality, necessity, and the true cost of war. As we reflect on these events, it is important to remember the complexity of the decision faced by President Truman and his advisors. They operated under immense pressure, with limited information and the urgent goal of ending a brutal war. Yet, the consequences of their choice continue to affect generations and challenge our understanding of justice and humanity. Was the decision to use atomic bombs justified? Could there have been alternative ways to end the war without such devastating loss of civilian life? What lessons should we carry forward to prevent future nuclear conflicts? Your thoughts and reflections are vital in keeping this history alive and relevant. We invite you to share your opinions and engage in respectful discussion. By examining the past with honesty and empathy, we can better understand the costs of war and the value of peace. Let this story remind us of the power of human choices and the responsibility we all share to build a safer world.